Here are your percent, decimal, and fraction video notes. You can use these notes as you complete your problems throughout the week, as well as your foldable. Let's start first. If we start with a percent and we move to a fraction. Well, we know that percent means out of 100. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make my denominator 100 because percent means out of 100. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my percentage or my amount and put that in my numerator. So 38% written as a fraction would be 38 over 100, or 38 hundredths. Make sure that you write this information in your notes and feel free to use different colors if that helps you. And let's move on to the next one. All right, let's start again with 38%. I'm going to try to write this one smaller because I want to do two examples. So I'm going to have 38%. Okay? And I want to change 38% to a decimal. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to write the number again. 38. I have the number 38, and I know 38%, I know my decimal point is right here. In order to convert from a percent to a decimal, all I have to do is move my decimal point 2 to the left. So if my decimal point is here, and I'm going to move it 2 to the left, 1, 2. Now my decimal point is here. So 38% written as a decimal would be 0.38 or 38 hundredths. Let's try another one. This time we're going to look at 5%. So I have 5%. Okay? And I know that percent means out of 100. And first thing I'm going to do is I write my percent, which in this case is 5. I know that my decimal point is always right after the number when I'm looking at this percent, right here. Now to convert it to a decimal, I have to move my decimal place 2 to the left. 1, 2. And I notice here that I'm left with a blank. What do I do with that blank? Well, I simply fill in a 0. So my answer would be 0.05 or 5 hundredths. So when I'm going from a percent to a decimal, all I do is move my decimal point 2 to the left. Now let's try a fraction to a percent. Okay, let's say I'm starting with the fraction 5/6, and I want to change that to a percent. I'm going to do two things this time. The first thing I'm going to do is I am going to convert my fraction to a decimal. And I do that simply by dividing my numerator by my denominator. So we're going to go ahead, and that means I'm typing my numerator in the calculator first, or if you're doing it by hand, I would do 5 divided by 6. So I'm going to go ahead and I put that in my calculator, and I get an answer of 0.8333333333. Okay? When I'm looking at the percent, I'm only looking at these two digits right here, the last one in the hundredths. So I'm just going to refer to this as 83 hundredths. Because if I rounded to my nearest hundredths place, if I look to the right, this is less than 5. So this is going to stay 83. So now that I've converted from my fraction to a decimal, I can go ahead and change it to a percent. And I do that by, I have 83 hundredths. And if I want to turn that into a percent, and I'll show you this again below, I simply move my decimal place 2 to the right. So 1, 2. My new decimal place is here. So this would become 83%, and that's because my decimal place has been moved to right here. Okay? And I'll show you another example of that down here. All right, so again, if I'm moving from a decimal to a percent, I'll start with the, let's say we'll start with the decimal, 67 hundredths. All right, if I want to change that to a percent, I'm going to rewrite the number over here, 67 hundredths. I simply move my decimal place 1, 2 to the left. So now I'm left with 67%. All right, let's try one more. Let's say I have the decimal 6 hundredths, okay? And I'm going to convert from a decimal to a percent, which means I move my decimal place 2 to the right. I'm going to rewrite my number over here so I can show my work, okay? And I'm going to move my decimal place 1, 2 to the right. And I am left with 6% because it's after the 6. And if I have a 0 in front of a number that's to the left of a decimal, I don't need to include it. So we can see my decimal place started here, and then it moved here. Started here, and then it moved here because I moved it 2 to the right. Okay? This is the end of your notes. It's really important that you listened and you copied everything down. I know my handwriting can be a little bit messy, so make sure that you were listening to what I had to say and writing it down so you didn't write something down that you didn't understand. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow.